Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to a new session of the Islam Study Circle. We are beginning with the Quranic verses that we're going to discuss today, inshallah, and later on we will proceed towards Hadith, and then, of course, to the Bible verse relating to one of the topics that we've already discussed. So, without any further ado, let me start off with the Quranic verse that we're going to study today. The verse that we're going to study today is from Surah Nisa. It's verse 136 of Surah Nisa. And the words are, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu aminu billahi wa rasulihi wal kitabil lazi nazzala ala rasulihi wal kitabil lazi anzala min qabl wa man yakfur billahi wa malaikatihi wa kutubihi wa rusulihi وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَقَدْ زَلَّ زَلَالًا بَعِيدًا. A translation of this verse is that believers profess faith in God and His Messenger, in the book He has revealed to His Messenger, and also in the book He revealed earlier. And remember that he who denies God, His angels, His books, His messengers, and the last day has strayed far. So you can clearly see, viewers, that this verse actually brings up to this concept and brings us to this concept of believing in all the prophets of God and, of course, in all the divine books which were sent with them without making any distinction. And this is clear from a number of other verses as well. And this verse here, when it says that, O believers, profess faith in God, you can clearly see the nuance which is created by this Arabic change, as the words are Ya ayyuhallazina amanu aminu billah, those who lay claim to faith, profess faith in God. So the first amanu actually is in the meaning of laying claim to faith, and the actual meaning of the verse would be that people who think that they are Muslims, people that think they are believers, they should in fact show this essence of belief by being truly believers in God and His messengers and the book that He revealed to His Prophet, which of course here refers to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and wal kitabil lazi anzala min qabl, and the book that was revealed before him. And since we know that the complete book that was revealed, and which of course can be called a book in every sense of the word, it was the Old Testament. So the reference here is that the Torah, which is the Old Testament, because as you can clearly see that the New Testament was basically a supplement to the Old Testament. The book was Torah, and Jesus, as He has claimed at a number of places, that He has not come to abrogate the law, but to complete it. And when He spoke of this, He was of course saying that He is supplementing the Torah, which is the actual book, which is the real book. So the complete real book, which was before the Quran and which this verse is actually telling us to believe in, is the Old Testament and the Torah. And this verse does not stop here. It goes on to say that وَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِاللَّهِ وَمَلَائِكَتِهِ وَكُتُبِهِ وَرُسُلِهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَقَدْ زَلَّ زَلَالًا بَعِيدًا, which means that it must be kept in mind, it must be remembered that people, or a person who denies God and His angels and His books and His messengers, and the last day, he has strayed far from the truth. So clearly you can see that the call of the divine message here, the call of the prophets here, is that we have to profess faith not only in the prophet who is standing before us, so to speak. The addressees were, of course, the people who were there in Arabia, but they are being told that they have to profess faith similarly in the earlier books of God and in earlier prophets as well. And hence, the other thing which is very important is that the Quran has stressed that a person who actually denies God and His angels and other books before the Quran, of course, and they do not profess this faith in other books beside the Quran and other messengers of God and the last day, then they should remember that they have really strayed far from the truth. And it is here, my dear viewers, that I often stress that we have to understand that Quran is not the first book of religion. It is the final book of religion. It is the last book of religion. Muhammad ﷺ is the last of the prophets of God. He is the last messenger of God. And hence, books which were revealed earlier and messengers which were sent earlier were also messengers and books of God. And we need to show respect, we need to profess faith in all the messengers, in all the books, read them, not discriminate them. I keep explaining this to my audience that the only edge which the Quran possesses over other books is that we have it in its original language. We have what it was in its original form, the way it has been revealed, and therefore this is the only, of course it's a very marked edge, it's a very prominent edge which it has on other books, but we must remember that other books prior to the Quran, which were revealed by the Almighty, have a lot of importance, and they can play a lot of role in our understanding not only of the Quran itself, but of course the way the Almighty speaks to His people, the way He communicates His messengers towards His messengers, His messages that have to be delivered to other people in humanity. So here is a verse in the Quran which actually inspires us to read about the previous prophets, to have faith in them, and of course the final authority does belong to the Quran. But again, as I said, that it is not just the Quran that we need to believe in and to read. The other previous books prior to the Quran are of equal, if not less, if not more, I would say. They may have a lesser importance vis-a-vis the fact that they are not preserved in their original language. That is the only distinction. But as far as professing faith in them is broadly concerned, the Quran is very clear that we need to understand them, we need to accept them. And here, of course, is that attitude that needs revision, and that is that Muslims generally, they do find time to read the Quran. They find time for their children to make them read the Quran. They instruct them in the Quran. But I have yet to see parents who are equally concerned that their child must also read the previous books which were revealed before the Quran. They are of equal importance because they are, of course, words of God as well. The only thing, as I said, is that they are from God, but they have to be read in the light of the Quran, because basically what we have from them is a translation of the Quran, of the Word of God. We do not have them preserved in their original language. We know that the Old Testament was revealed in the Hebrew language, but the things that we have today, what we have today in the form of Old Testament is actually a translation of the Old Testament. And since we do not have the originals do not survive, hence it is very important that we read them in the light of the Quran. And those who have read the Old Testament, of course, whether the New Testament and the Psalms, can vouch for themselves that they are so very similar to what the Quran says. The Sharia also is very common. The stories of the prophets are extremely common. There are some more details, in fact, which are found in the Old and the New Testaments, especially in the histories where they are mentioned. As I said, the only difference which the Quran has, or distinction which the Quran has over them, is that we have the original word of the Quran, the original words of the Quran preserved before us in the very manner in which it was revealed, contrary to what we don't have, of course, regarding other books of the Quran. And you see, the other thing that is important here in this particular verse to understand and to practice is that the last part of the verse is actually sounding a warning to us. It says, وَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِاللَّهِ وَمَلَائِكَتِهِ وَكُتُبِهِ وَرُسُلِهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَقَدْ زَلَّ زَلَالًا بَعِيدًا. It says that those who deny God and the angels and the books of God and His messengers and the last day, the day of judgment, then they have strayed far. So it needs to be understood that these basic tenets of belief of every believer are spelled out here, and the purpose is to tell them that if they intentionally deny, of course there is a question of understanding these tenets. One may have questions regarding the hereafter, one may have questions regarding the messengers of God, regarding His angels, regarding His books. But if in spite of understanding them and knowing them, there is a deliberate denial of God and His angels and His books and messengers in the last day, then the Quran is very stern here and very strict here. It says that person who does so, who intentionally denies the books of God, intentionally denies the Almighty Himself, then he should know that he is strayed far away from the truth. and hence it's a word of warning for all of us. And the starting point, my dear viewers, of this is that we must, as much as we can, try to read the Old Testament as well. We must recommend the Old Testament also to our children, to our colleagues, whoever we are, whoever are under our circle of influence, and tell them that the discriminatory behavior which Muslims generally show towards other books of God is absolutely uncalled for. And we need to understand that the starting point of any interfaith dialogue, the starting point of any mutual discussion between religions has to proceed from the scriptures, from the respective scriptures. So therefore it's all the more important that we organize these interfaith scripture study sessions as much as we can, in which both the Old Testament and the Quran, they are read side by side. The differences and the commonalities are discussed, and people are made to understand what the message of the books of God is right from those books of God, instead of going to some clergy person or sending any other person. Of course, that is a need whenever there is a question in our minds, but primarily if we read these books the way we should, in an objective way, the Old Testament, the New Testament, and of course the Quran, it is the first step, it is the very initial step that we can take in creating harmony between religions, in understanding the other religion, in making us, of course, understand our own religion as well, our own book as well, and at the same time give this impression that this interfaith dialogue can only flourish if we are able to discuss our differences. It's not just the commonalities. Of course, the commonalities are huge, but they don't cause a problem. It is the differences which cause a problem, and these differences, they have to be discussed in a very amicable way, in a very friendly way, in a very academic way. And the purpose is to educate one another. The purpose is not to force one's belief on the other person, but the purpose is to make him or her understand how a particular religious group feels or thinks about his own self or its own self. So this Quranic verse, as I said, has this very, very important message for us, that we have to have this magnanimity in us so as to believe in all the prophets of God and all the books of God, with the edge which the Quran has, that it has the original words of God still with us, being preserved in its original form, and therefore we can refer it vis-a-vis every translation that we have. So now we move on to the next part of our segment, and this is a hadith that we are going to study. As you can see, it is being displayed on your screens. This hadith has been taken from the Al-Jami al-Sahih of Imam Muslim. And the words of this hadith that need our attention, let me just read out these words before you, and then we can look at the translation. It says, "An Abi Hurairah annahu sami'a Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam yaqul, inna sharra an-nas zul wajhain, allazi ya'ti ha'ula'i bi wajhin wa ha'ula'i bi wajhin." So a simple translation is that Abu Hurairah reported that he heard God's messenger say, "The worst among the people is he who has two faces. To some people he comes with one face, and to others with another." So it's basically a warning that is being sounded to us, that we should have the same standards, the same personality, the same outward approach that we have for everyone. We should not have double standards. We should not have standards which are different for different people, because of course this would mean that we are selecting between the truth, selecting on the basis of convenience, selecting on the basis of our own choice and not on the basis of merit. So a simple upright person is expected to be the same he is from outside and from inside, in both cases. And this can only happen if a person has the courage to confess and to face the audience the way he is or she is from inside. And as we have discussed this a number of times, that this needs this internal courage which at times we are lacking. And this internal courage can be gauged, can be gathered, if we make the opposite of courage, which is fear, of course, subservient to just one fear, and that is the fear of God. That is the fear of displeasing Him. So if we would like to fear God, if we make ourselves fear only our Creator, the ultimate result of this would be that the courage that will be produced in us, the courage we would be able to muster, would be sufficient for us to make us behave as we are from inside, as opposed to pose what we are from outside and having a different personality from inside. So what this hadith is actually warning us about is this hypocrisy, this hypocritical personality that we might have, that we look outwardly we appear outwardly for people as having one personality, whereas internally we have an entirely different personality. We might pose a person who we are not from our inside. So a truthful person, a righteous person, a rightful person, a person who is close to God, is the same from inside. He is the same personality inside out. He has the same worldview. He has the same views regarding people that he has from his inside. He does not make a false pretense. He does not put up a false show of what he is. And this is the sign of a truthful person. This is the sign of an upright person. This is the sign of a courageous person. This is the sign of a person who knows that even if he is a person who is doing something wrong and he's struggling to correct himself, he's actually expressing his own weakness before people and not posing that he is a person who is doing something else. So if he is doing something which is a conversion, which is not in consonance with what the right is, he is confessing that. He's saying that this is something which I'm struggling with. But he is not posing something. He's not saying one thing and practicing another. He's not saying one thing and doing the opposite from inside. And as I said, the thing that is needed in this regard is that courage that often we fail to muster. We tend to have this fear of the people outside us or around us. We want to pose before them as people who have a certain personality. At times it is a personality who is totally different. And as this hadith clearly says, it is in fact totally different from the personality that we are from inside. So let us make this effort, especially from today, if not we have started earlier, that we will not artificially pose ourselves to be different from what we are from inside. Let us express what we are from inside as we are, and let this be a starting point, a starting day in which we do not hide ourselves, in which we do not hide behind other people or behind other subterfuges. We are what we are. And if we accept what we are, this is the starting point of correction as well. Because you see, a lot of things can only be corrected if we come out of this status of self-denial, in which we deny certain things that we are actually facing or we actually are. So we have to accept ourselves the way we are, and we have to present ourselves the way we are. And if we do so, we'll realize that there are certain things that we are ashamed of, that we should not be. And unless that feeling arises in us, of course, we do not have that courage, we will not have that urge to refine ourselves. So in other words, posing ourselves what we are is also the starting point of our correction. A person who has two faces is a person who will never have the courage to correct himself or herself. He will always hide his faults. He will always try to find various excuses to put forth further excuses instead of correcting himself or herself. So the starting point of correction, the starting point of self-reformation and self-realization is also this fact that you have to accept your own faults and you must not pose about them, and then make a very concerted effort, make a very strong effort to reform yourself, to bring about that change from within. And I think it does not need any other explanation that when we are posing ourselves as different people, when we are posing ourselves as people that we are different from our inside, we are actually deceiving people. And deceiving people, of course, this can work for some part of the time, maybe some part of our lives, but ultimately this deception is going to be exposed, if not in this world, of course, in the next world. So this deception, the amount of embarrassment it will cause once we get exposed can only be imagined. So let us be brave souls, let us be courageous souls, let us accept what we are, and then if we are something that we are not very proud of, if we are very ashamed of something, then let this be the starting point of our correction as well. So now I would like to move on to the next part of our segment, and that is the Bible verse of the day. The verse that I've chosen actually is the 12th verse of the Gospel of St. Matthew. It's the 7th chapter, verse number 12, and the verse is, "All those things then which you would have men to do to you, even so do you to them, because this is the law and the prophets." So you can see the prophet Jesus teaching us that whatever you expect from others, you should, whatever you think that you are, you pose yourself to be, it is the same that you should expect from others. So what the words are, which all those things which you would have men do to you, even so do you to them. So what good you expect from the other side, whatever justice or whatever nice things you expect from the other side, you have to reciprocate them. You have to pay back. You have to be of the same caliber. So it would be outright injustice if you expect people to be good to you, people to be just to you, people to be caring for you, but at the same time you have a different standard for other people, and you do not pay back their goodness, their nicety, their good manners in the same coin. So basically it's the question of reciprocation, of returning the good that you receive in the same way. The Quran at one point in its eternal message in Surah Rahman says, "Hal jaza'ul ihsan illa al-ihsan," which means that the good that you do is going to be returned to you on the day of judgment. So what else is the reward of goodness except goodness itself? So therefore, we need to understand that if we expect others should be nice to us, if we expect others that they should hide our faults, if we expect that others should encourage us, if we expect others to be friends to us and to provide a shoulder to us on which we can fall back, we have to behave in the same manner for other people. If we expect justice from other people to be just to us, we should dispense justice to them as well. If we expect them to be caring to us, we should be caring ourselves to the other person as well. So this cannot work just on one way, that you expect good things from other and you yourself are practicing or perhaps not reciprocating in an equal manner. I think this is such a common sense approach which Jesus has adopted here, that perhaps it does not need any explanation. It appeals to us so much that we cannot expect something for ourselves and then do not have the courage to return the same thing to that person. If we do that, this would only mean that we are people who are selfish, we are people who are self-centered, we like people that they should do good to us, but when our turn comes to do good to the other party or the other person, we fall short of this goodness. So this would be a basic flaw in morality, which of course cannot be tolerated, which cannot at all be put up with. Goodness has to be returned with goodness. Human nature is such that goodness, if reciprocated in a proper manner, will always bring that feeling of spiritual enhancement, will bring that feeling of spiritual advancement in us. It will tell us that humanity basically is one single family. Humanity is the name of a large global family in which people feel for each other, in which people are able to feel the pain. Living in the Eastern Hemisphere, for example, a person, if he feels the pain of a person who is far off, in a far off country, would show the fact that you have this concern for that global family of which we are a part. So dear viewers, I think this is a lesson, an object lesson that we must understand, that life is something which is only meaningful when we have the same standards for ourselves and for other people. If we expect something good, then we have to be good to others. This cannot happen, that we expect goodness from others and we show ill intent or things which are, of course, they are not in consonance with the norms of justice and common sense and nicety. So with these words, viewers, we come to the end of this first segment of our study circle. So we have studied a Quranic verse, we have studied a Hadith, we have also studied a verse of the Bible, and you can clearly see that these verses which have been selected, they belong to that basic morality, that basic human core morality which has to be found in us, which has to be reciprocated at times, and also has to be a starting point. Life, if you want a life of spiritual satisfaction, if we want a life in which we have that peace of mind, then the starting point is to look at our own faults, to self-evaluate ourselves, to put ourselves through a very rigorous process of self-accountability, to reevaluate our own selves. And let me tell you that the best time to do so at times is when perhaps a person is feeling sick, or he is taking time off from the routine of life, or he may be traveling, or he may be doing something which he does not normally do. So that is the best time to do some soul searching. That is the best time to review our lives, to find out that maybe we are doing something which in our normal routine of life we are not able to detect, but at the same time it does not conform to the norms of decency, to the norms of high morality. So with these words, we come to the end of the first session of our study circle. If you have any questions regarding what we have just studied, I'll be glad to answer them. And inshallah, in the next part, we'll take up a common misconception regarding Islam. So please let me know if you have any questions. So, Madam, yes, Madam Rafia Khaja, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
The Muslims, the Christians and Jews, Muslims love calling non-Muslims kafir. The other Christians and Jews, they also have problems with us. When the Quran wants us to accept the previous books, and the Jews and Christians also know about it, then why is there so much turmoil between the people in this world?
Well, as I said, that this happens when you get to this exclusivist mentality in which you think that you are bestowed with what is right and all other people are wrong. I call it a flawed academic attitude which has another name, and that is called self-righteousness. So this self-righteousness is the biggest enemy of not only knowledge but all academic thinking, all forms of academic thinking, because it stops your learning process. It gives you this impression that you are superior to others. Whatever you have said is the ultimate truth. Whatever others have or others are claiming is something very secondary. So the answer to this question probably is that which I keep repeating, and I'll just perhaps reiterate here as well, and that is to introduce this institution of critical thinking amongst Muslims. It's also present in some other denominations, but we have to speak of our own selves first. We have to put our own house in order first, and the fact is that we Muslims need to understand that in spite of being the recipients of the final book of God, it is not that we have been promised salvation merely because we are Muslims. And this is a basic flaw that has arisen and it has actually plagued our thoughts. It has contaminated our thoughts. It has made us self-righteous. It has made us lose our humility. It has made us lose the consideration of the other party which is present. And hence it has unfortunately led to this deadlock. So I would say the primary responsibility is of the scholars, is of people who teach religion to their progeny, to their children, to their students, that they have to inculcate this tolerance. They have to inculcate this academic approach amongst their students, that they have to be self-critical, at the same time being critical of their own selves, but not accepting the fact that they have the ultimate word, or they are the final word. None of us is in a position to claim that we have the ultimate truth. What we can claim is that we are seekers of the truth. We are trying to find out what the truth is. And as far as the other is concerned, whether he is a Christian or a Jew or a Hindu or a Sikh, it is his personal choice. And let God be the judge of what a person is believing. And instead of maybe discussing our views on a cup of tea or on a social gathering, coming together, expressing our views, if we end up fighting with each other, if we end up claiming ourselves to be superior to others, then this is where the problem starts. So I think the bottom line is that our teachers, our religious authorities, they have to inculcate this message of tolerance, this message that we are humble servants of God. We are very, very ordinary, humble people who are trying our best to make ourselves eligible to the paradise that He has promised us. And for this, we have to work on our own agenda. And instead of accusing other people, instead of blaming other people, the need of the hour is to discuss our problems. And if at the end of the day, there is an inclusive element to this discussion, then let it be. Because if you have read the Quran, you might have noticed that there are many places in the Quran in which the Almighty says that there are a lot of differences which the Almighty is going to decide on the Day of Judgment. فِيمَا كَانُوا فِيهِ يَخْتَلِفُونَ. So this is a Day of Judgment in which the Almighty says that let them come to us and then we will resolve their differences. So who are we to do so if God has taken up this responsibility? Our responsibility is to concentrate on our own selves, and to whatever we think is truth, we should follow it. We should not judge people. We should not judge people by our standards. Of course, each person has his own standards. Let he be judged by his standards. Let the Almighty be the judge. As far as we are concerned, we have to concentrate on our own selves and try to promote harmony by actually bringing to fore these verses of the Quran which have a message for people who are exclusivists, for people who would not like to discuss other religions. Here is the Almighty calling us that you have to believe in previous prophets, you have to believe in their books. So if the message of the Quran is presented forcefully and of course politely to the students of Quran in this manner, I'm sure that this will work. But again, as I said, this needs this change in approach. And this change in approach can only occur if we think that we are people who can falter, if we are people who can err, we are people who can make wrong judgments, and we have to be much more careful regarding our own selves than to decide what the other person or the other view is, because that is the ambit which the Almighty has reserved for Himself. So if we start doing this, then what we are doing is we are stepping into the domain of God. That domain is reserved for the Almighty. We have to remain in our own domain, and our domain relates to our own selves, and it relates to a very healthy discussion whenever there is a point of difference, and not imposing ourselves on others at the same time, not pushing the other person, not behaving in a manner that he does not have a breathing space. At the same time, we are the ones who should provide that breathing space. We should stop at a point whenever there is a difference of opinion and we think that our differences, the voice is rising beyond the normal tone, and instead of discussing arguments, we are now after the throats of each other. So I think this basic change has to be brought about by the clergy through their teaching, and before that, of course, by the parents, by the schools, and foremost by our own selves through self-realization that this is not going to take us anywhere. So I hope I've answered your question. So let me know if you have any other question. Otherwise, we will proceed towards some of the misconceptions that we're going to discuss today. So it seems that we have finished our questions for this part of the segment. So I would like now to discuss some of the other misconceptions that we've discussed so far, and the misconception that I'd like to discuss today actually relates to this to some of the issues which of course are what we call as conditions for marriage. And one of the fundamental issue here that needs to be discussed is the issue of meher or dowry. So the dowries that Muslim men are required to pay to their wives at the time of marriage, what is the significance of the dower? Why exactly are Muslims or Muslim husbands obligated to pay the dower? Is it some sort of a commitment, or is it some sort of a price that you're paying for bringing a wife home? So if you study the Quran and of course the tradition which exists before the Quran, we come to realize that the Almighty has actually obligated the husband to be the breadwinner of the family. He is the person who is responsible, and he is liable for the family that he is now beginning, starting off with his wife, and of course ultimately he will have children as well. So when a husband gives an amount which is called meher or dower to the wife just before marriage, he actually makes this commitment as a symbolic expression of that commitment. He gives that money to the wife, that here is this money I'm placing in your hands, so that it could be a token of this responsibility that I'm taking of you. So when he gives this money to the wife, he is actually announcing to the wife that here is a symbol or token of that money, and this is a commitment for myself to you, that I'll be your provider, I'll be the person who will earn for you. Whether you earn or not is of course something which is the choice of a wife, but the responsibility of a husband is that when he gives this dower, he gives this solemn commitment, this in the form of this token, that he is responsible for the expenses of the wife, for the expenses of the house that he is going to run, for the children who are going to come into being as a family later on. And let me connect this to a very relevant concept and a question that exists today in most third world countries, and that is the maintenance allowance which today Muslim men give to their wives. And I am really shocked at times to note the fact that the amount of money that they pay to their or give to their wives as pocket money is a meager sum of what actually they should be giving. So, and forgetting the fact that when they gave that token in the form of meher, they had actually given this commitment that they will provide generously to the wife, of course keeping in view his own economic position. And what happens after marriage is that the first thing of course that happens is that meher is seldom given in the first place. It is deferred, and at times part of it is given and the rest is deferred, and most of the time almost all part of it is deferred. It is in the fitness of things, it is in the spirit of the meher itself, that it must be given. It must be given at the time of marriage, so that the wife thinks that a person is serious in his commitment of supporting her. And the offshoot of this support, of course, is the fact that a husband should be a person who is generous in this support. When he is giving this maintenance allowance to his wife to, for example, run the affairs of the house, he should give a generous amount of pocket money as well to his wife so that she can maintain herself. And then there are certain things, there are certain pitfalls which husbands don't realize. At times they give, as I said, a very small amount of pocket money to their wives. At other times, a wife has to repeatedly ask for money for her own maintenance. And of course, every person has self-respect. And how far can a wife go in asking and re-asking and re-asking? And I have seen husbands who keep on refusing in the form of a polite smile, maybe, or something. And instead of granting her a generous share at the start of the month, and I would actually advise that it should be on the last date of the previous month, that a husband, in respect of that token that he gave on the meher, as meher at the time of wedding, should continue with his pledge. And each month, when he hands over this household expense to her own pocket money, a hefty, a healthy amount of pocket money should be given to her. And of course, as we see and as we can clearly see because of inflation and other things, it's not that this pocket money should be the one that he started to give maybe 10 or 15 years ago. It should increase by the year, keeping in view the inflation rate. Of course, husbands expect their own salaries to be raised by the inflation rate, which increases every year. So when they are giving this allowance and this maintenance to their wives, they must keep in mind that this should also periodically be revised, and perhaps better if it is revised every year, and this disparity is taken care of. This inflation and devaluation of money is taken care of by increasing this maintenance. And they should also realize that even if a wife is earning, giving her this pocket money, giving her the maintenance is still his responsibility. It is perhaps a sweet will of the wife that she can forego amount if she wants to, or she can perhaps say that I don't need a big amount, I'm earning myself. But then that is the decision of the wife. If she, in spite of earning a lot, still thinks that she would like the support of her husband and the maintenance allowance that is to be given by the husband, she has every right for this. She has every right to demand so. And so we need to understand that as husbands, as people who are the heads of a family, the responsibility which the Almighty has imposed on husbands is far more than they actually imagine, is far more than they actually put up with. They should realize that a woman has been given in their custody, a woman has been given in their financial, I would say, overlay in which they have to bear her expenses. And the Quran at one place says, وَعَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, that you have to deal with your wives in the most befitting of manners, in a very congenial manner, in a very generous way. And this can only happen. I have seen, as a person who has been involved in marriage counseling for so many years, that one of the biggest reasons that becomes a basis of fight or debate or rift between a husband and wife is this miserly attitude of the husband, and in which he actually is not providing enough to the wife, at least not enough vis-a-vis what he is earning. Of course, if he is earning a small amount, that's another thing. But what if he is earning in millions and he's just providing a few thousand rupees to his wife? So that's something which is really shameful, and it needs to be understood that if he is doing so, he might be overbearing, he might be overpowering his wife still, but he will be answerable for this to the Almighty. And he should realize that a person who has been given in his custody is a person who is a human being, who has self-respect, who has self-esteem. And if anything happens to this self-esteem, then that basic bond of humanity which exists between human beings is endangered. It is put into jeopardy. So this is a very important area in which Muslim husbands need to improve their attitude towards their wives. They have to provide for them generously. They have to revise these maintenance allowances that they give. They must give them punctually before the month starts, before even the time arises, so that the self-respect of a wife demanding money is not sacrificed. So this is something which I wanted to bring up today, and let all of you share with me this concern that Muslim husbands have to be generous. They have to show this compassion, even if their wife is earning, even if she is a working lady. It's still their responsibility to earn and to provide for her in a very generous way. And if they do so, it's not something that they are doing as a favor to them. It's their responsibility. So with these words, viewers, we come to the end of this second segment as well. If you have any questions, please let me know, and inshallah we'll proceed with them. So I can see Sayyid Mohsin, the hand being raised there. Could you please proceed with your question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hello.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I can hear you.
So I was Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I was listening to what you said about how we should encourage interreligious discussions and discuss scriptures sincerely. I agree with that, but I also feel, and I want your opinion on this, that believers, and let's talk about Muslims here because that is our audience. Muslims should, in fact, must. I think they have a responsibility as believers to critically analyze and try to verify their religion to the best of their abilities, because nothing to a believer, the religion or the belief of a believer is essentially his worldview. That's what he believes will happen to him after death and how we should lead his life. So I think that is the most important aspect of a believer's life. So he should do as much as he can to try to critically analyze and verify his religion, every single believer, to the best of his abilities, and that should not be only limited to the scholars. That's how I feel, and I would like to have your opinion on this.
I do agree with you. Of course, this should be the case, but you see, the question might arise here is the methodology, because you see, we just cannot start learning again what perhaps we have inherited. We start off with a set of beliefs, and what we do is that whenever there is a question that arises not only in our minds, but perhaps in the minds of our critics or the people around us, we must not lull it to sleep. This aspect of critical thinking is the most pronounced when people ask questions that might be bothersome to you, or there's something which is in your own mind which comes into your own mind as a question, as a doubt, as even an observation or even an objection in your own mind. And instead of pursuing that objection, instead of trying to find out the answer, you try to lull it to sleep. So I think the best way towards critical thinking is that whenever there is an issue, whenever there is a critical issue in the society, in people around us, in our own study, we should take it as a challenge and then spend some time, take out some time and try to resolve that issue. So what I'm proposing here is that it's not that we need to start off with every concept that we have learned from our parents or from our society and start critically analyzing that, because that would take a lot of time. It's also very impractical. The practical approach is that whenever there is a question in your surroundings, in your own mind, wherever it comes from, does not matter. It is here that you must critically analyze that question. And it is here that what you call that experiential learning that will come into play. You will experience that you have gone through a case study in which you have studied a particular issue in its background and come to a conclusion. So of course I would agree with you that that is the only way out. It has to be critical thinking, but the manner in which the critical thinking is perhaps more practically applied and available to us is that we start off with the criticism that we receive either from our own selves, our own minds, or from the external society, or from our colleagues, or from any external happening, and take it up as a challenge.
Well, yes, okay, that does make sense. It would be impractical to go after every little thing that we've heard, but every belief, every system, every religion is based upon many core fundamentals, right? Mm-hmm. So what I don't understand is why wait for a question to come to your mind or somebody to ask you when you have the internet. There are so many people having dialogue on the internet.
So that is not being discouraged. You see, if you prefer that methodology, that is, of course, that can be adopted. But what I'm saying is that at times it's not possible for everyone, because you see, we are speaking of the general approach that people should have. So a more practical approach is something which every person can relate to. But for example, if a person like yourself would not like to wait for any question to arise, and he just picks up any issue at random and would like to research more into it and would like to find out the contesting opinions which exist regarding that particular issue, and would like to form his own opinion, he's most welcome to do it. But as I said, that this is a very tall order and not everyone has the time and the approach to do so. But if someone can afford it, we will not stop him. Because you see, when you are studying religion, and it's an urge which comes out of yourself, anything which is done to pursue that inner urge is bound to succeed. So yes, I would agree with you on that at times you don't need to wait. But for the common person, as I said, there are times in which this urge becomes very strong when there is an external stimulus. In the absence of that external stimulus, people tend to be a little ignorant, a little indifferent. So yes, if there are other people who would like to do so in a systematic way, they are most welcome to do so. I was generally talking about the general masses, to whom issues become issues when someone actually raises them, or they come to you with full force because of, for example, you see these honor killings or these terrorist happenings which come every now and then in various parts of the world. So this is one area in which whenever an event, whenever there's an outbreak of such things, there is this chance that people get this stimulus in them that let's find out what the truth is. Is it that Muslims have been asked to kill non-Muslims, or is this that honor killings is something which is part of Islam? So that provides that extra stimulus. But yes, of course, as I said, if you have that stimulus already present in you as a spark, I would advise you to please proceed the way you would like to.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a hand raised from Shehzad Ali. If you can hear me. So Mr. Shehzad Ali, are you able to hear me? Could you please unmute your mic? It seems that you have self-muted your mic. It's not muted from here. It seems that my voice is not going through to Shehzad Ali Sahab because your mic is self-muted. So in case you have changed your mind to ask a question, please, if there are other people around who would like to who have a question and would like to raise it, we still have about 5 minutes or 7 minutes to go before we end the session. Okay, so I do believe that there are no more questions, and we are through with this session for today, perhaps, and inshallah. So take care of yourselves. We will meet inshallah next Saturday, same time, and Khuda Hafiz from here, and a very good week to you. Wishing you a very, very good and a comfortable week to all of you.